My dad looked me dead in the eyes and barked, "No one wants to see your face at my retirement celebration. You've been a letdown your entire life. Don't embarrass me one last time." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I simply placed the invitation back on the table and asked, "Then why did you invite me?" His expression changed so quickly that I almost smiled. My name is Nell, and for most of my life my father, Wade, made sure I knew I wasn't the daughter he wanted. He praised my cousin Cal while describing me as irresponsible, difficult, and incapable of making good decisions. So when an invitation to Wade's retirement celebration arrived, I thought maybe things had finally changed. I was wrong. As I walked away from his house, Wade's longtime business partner, Bram, hurried after me. He looked over his shoulder before whispering, "Your father doesn't want you at that party because there's something you're not supposed to hear." Then he handed me a folded piece of paper. "Go there before Wade knows you have it." I opened it and saw my mother's old attorney's address. For a few seconds I just stared at the ink. Vera Hale. The name was written beneath the address in Bram's cramped handwriting. I folded the paper and slipped it into my purse. When I looked back toward my father's house, I could still see the warm glow from his living room windows. Wade had already gone inside. Probably calling someone. Probably making sure his version of the story reached them before mine ever could. I didn't drive to Vera's office that night. Instead I went home. I locked my apartment door behind me, set my purse on the kitchen counter, and pulled out the folder where I'd kept the few financial papers Mom had left me. I had never paid much attention to them. After her death, every document connected to her seemed to carry too much weight, so I'd stored most of them in a box and avoided opening it. That night I opened everything. Medical bills, insurance statements, property records, bank correspondence. Then I found something I had never seen before. A statement from a savings account bearing my name. I frowned and read it again. The account had been opened years earlier when I was still in college. There were deposits I couldn't explain. Large ones. Then came the withdrawals. Thousands of dollars at a time. I checked the account number against the paperwork. It matched. My stomach tightened. I had never opened that account. I pulled out the authorization form attached to the statement. Someone had signed my name. At first glance it looked convincing. Then I noticed the final letter in my signature. I always curved it upward. This one didn't. I grabbed an old driver's license application from the same box and compared the signatures side by side. They weren't mine. I kept digging. The deposits weren't random. They came from an account connected to a property my mother had supposedly sold when her medical expenses became overwhelming. That explanation had always bothered me. Mom had owned a small rental property outside town, and Wade had told everyone selling it was necessary. But the records in front of me told a different story. The property hadn't been sold. It had been transferred. The recipient was a company I'd never heard of. I searched the company's registered owner on the document. My breath caught. The company was connected to Wade. I leaned back from the kitchen table and stared at the papers. For years my father had called me irresponsible. Yet someone had been using my name to move money. I didn't call Wade. I didn't call Cal. I took photographs of every document, returned each paper exactly where I'd found it, and finally picked up my phone. Then I dialed the number beside Vera Hale's name. A woman answered on the fourth ring. "Vera Hale speaking. My name is Nell Mercer. My mother was." "I know who you are," she interrupted softly. I sat straighter. There was a pause before she asked, "How much has Wade told you?" "Nothing." Another silence. "Then you should come see me." I drove to her office the next afternoon with copies of the documents tucked inside my purse. Vera studied each page without speaking. When she reached the property transfer, her expression hardened. "Your mother came to me before she died," she said. I felt my fingers tighten around the strap of my purse. She believed Wade was moving money without her permission. She was preparing to challenge him. What stopped her? Vera looked directly at me. "You did." My throat tightened. "Wade threatened to make you responsible for debts you knew nothing about. He also told your mother that nobody would believe you if she accused him." Vera opened a drawer and removed a sealed envelope. "Your mother left this with me. She gave me strict instructions. I could only hand it to you if you came here asking questions." My hands trembled as I took it. My name was written across the front in my mother's handwriting. For the first time, I understood that Wade hadn't simply abandoned me. He had spent years making sure nobody would believe me. For the first time, I understood that Wade hadn't simply abandoned me. He had spent years making sure nobody would believe me. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. What's inside? Vera folded her hands on the desk. Something your mother wanted you to have when you were ready to hear the truth. I opened it carefully. The first page was a handwritten letter. I recognized Mom's looping handwriting immediately, and seeing it nearly broke the control I'd been forcing myself to maintain. She wrote that Wade had been transferring family assets through companies controlled by people she didn't know. At first, she thought he was protecting the family from financial trouble. Then she discovered the transfers were benefiting him personally. She had confronted him. According to her letter, Wade became furious. He told her that if she tried to involve a lawyer, he would make sure I inherited every debt attached to the family. Mom wrote that she was afraid, not for herself but for me. I stopped reading and looked at Vera. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because your mother made me promise not to, Vera said. She believed you needed to discover the truth when you were strong enough to act on it. I looked back at the letter. Near the bottom, Mom had written another warning. If Wade ever says Nell is irresponsible, ask why he needs everyone to believe that. My chest tightened. Then I saw a name beneath the final paragraph. Cal. My father's favorite nephew. I looked up sharply. What does Cal have to do with this? Vera didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pulled another folder from her cabinet and placed it in front of me. Your mother believed Cal was receiving property through one of Wade's companies. I opened the folder. The first document showed a property transfer. The second showed the receiving company. The third contained Cal's signature. I stared at it. Cal had spent years acting like the one person in the family who understood me. Whenever Wade criticized me at holidays, Cal would quietly tell me not to take it personally. Now I wondered whether those conversations had been something else entirely. Vera watched my face. Don't confront either of them yet. Why? Because if Wade knows what you have, he will destroy whatever evidence remains. I closed the folder. For once, I wasn't thinking about how to make my father understand me. I was thinking about how to make sure he couldn't lie his way out of this. I slipped the documents into my purse. Then I looked at Vera. What do we do first? She leaned back in her chair. We find out exactly how much your father took. We find out exactly how much your father took. I nodded, but before I could ask another question, my phone vibrated against the desk. Wade. I stared at his name. Vera noticed. Don't answer. The phone stopped. Then it rang again. I let it ring. A few seconds later, a message appeared. We need to talk. I was angry yesterday. I shouldn't have said those things. I almost laughed. Wade had never apologized without wanting something in return. I showed Vera the message. She read it once and said, He's worried. About me? No. About what you know. I drove home without responding. That evening another message arrived. Come to the retirement dinner. I want to make things right. I typed 3 different replies before deleting all of them. Finally I wrote I'll be there. I knew it was dangerous, but refusing would only make him suspicious. The next afternoon, I met Bram in a quiet diner several miles from Wade's office. He looked exhausted. I shouldn't be doing this, he said. Then why are you? He slid a folder across the table. Because I signed things I shouldn't have signed. I opened it. Inside were company transfers, property records, and internal statements. Several transactions had been moved through accounts I recognized from Vera's documents. Bram pointed to one page. This is the final transfer. Wade wants it completed before the retirement celebration. Where is the money going? Cal. My jaw tightened. Bram lowered his voice. Your father told me once that if anyone questioned the numbers, I should say you had already been compensated for your share of the family assets. There was the story Wade had been preparing. He hadn't just planned to steal from me. He had planned to make the theft look like something I had already agreed to. I photographed the documents beneath the table. Then Bram's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Wade. Bram answered on speaker only after I nodded. Where are you? Wade asked. At the office. Pause. You're lying. Bram's face drained. Wade continued, quieter now. If Nell has contacted you, you need to remember who kept you employed all these years. The call ended. Neither of us spoke. Then Bram looked at me. He knows. I closed the folder. Then we stopped reacting to him. Bram frowned. What does that mean? It means he thinks I'm still the daughter he can intimidate. I slipped the evidence into my purse. For once, I'm going to let him believe exactly what he wants. And I walked out of the diner before Bram could ask what I had planned. The evening air felt cooler than it had when I arrived. I crossed the parking lot slowly, keeping the folder pressed against my side. My phone buzzed again before I reached my car. Wade. I let it ring. Then another message appeared. Don't make tonight difficult, Nell. I want peace. I slipped the phone into my pocket. Peace was the word people used when they wanted silence. I drove to the retirement celebration with Vera's documents secured in a separate envelope beneath the passenger seat. Bram had warned me that Wade was moving the final paperwork, but I wasn't going to confront him in the parking lot or make a scene before I understood who else was involved. When I entered the banquet hall, Wade was already surrounded by co-workers. He spotted me almost immediately. For half a second his smile vanished. Then it returned. There she is, he said loudly. My daughter. Several people turned. Wade walked toward me and placed a hand on my shoulder as though we'd spent the last few years hugging instead of fighting. I'm glad you came. I smiled politely. So am I. His fingers tightened slightly against my shoulder. Let's try to keep tonight pleasant. I wouldn't want to ruin your big night. His eyes narrowed. Then he turned toward the guests. Enjoy yourself. I watched him walk away. The room was decorated with photographs from his career, framed awards, and a large banner celebrating his retirement. People laughed around tables covered with white cloths and polished glasses. I recognized several relatives. Cal stood near the front, accepting congratulations as though the evening belonged to him too. When our eyes met, he looked away first. That told me more than an explanation could have. I took a seat near the back and watched Wade move from table to table. He was performing. Every handshake was deliberate. Every laugh was measured. Every story made him look generous, hardworking, and devoted to his family. Then he stepped onto the small stage. The room quieted. Wade thanked his co-workers, praised his career, and spoke about sacrifice. Then his voice softened. Everything I've accomplished was for my family. I felt my jaw tighten. He looked directly at me. I've always tried to give my children opportunities. A few people nodded. Wade continued. Unfortunately, not everyone knows what to do with those opportunities. The room went still. I knew exactly where this was going. He lifted his glass. To family. Then he announced that Cal would receive control of the remaining family property. A few guests applauded. Wade looked at me. And Nell has already received more support than most people could ever expect. I slowly stood. Would you like to explain where Mom's money went before you finish? The applause stopped. Wade's face went completely still. For a moment nobody moved. I could hear the faint hum of the air conditioner above us and the clink of a glass being set down somewhere near the back. Then Wade smiled. It wasn't the warm smile he'd been wearing for his co-workers. This one was tight and controlled. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. I reached into my purse and placed a folder on the table. You should. Cal stepped forward. Nell, this isn't the place for this. I turned toward him. Funny. You seemed perfectly comfortable receiving property during Mom's illness. His expression changed. Wade immediately snapped. Enough. I opened the folder. The Millbrook property was transferred to a company connected to you 6 months after Mom's medical account was emptied. Cal looked at Wade. What is she talking about? Wade didn't answer him. Instead he pointed at me. She has always been jealous of you, Cal. She'll say anything when she doesn't get what she wants. A few relatives exchanged uncomfortable looks. I expected that. For years, Wade had trained everyone to see me as emotional and unreliable. So I didn't argue. I pulled out the official transfer document and held it up. This has the registration number, transfer date, and receiving company. Cal stared at it. I've never seen that. You signed it. His face drained. Wade stepped toward me. Give me those papers. No. His voice dropped. Nell. I looked directly at him. You've spent years telling everyone I can't handle money. I'm starting to understand why. The room fell silent again. Then I placed another document beside the first. This company received funds from the same account connected to Mom's property. Cal looked at Wade. You told me that money came from the business. Wade's eyes hardened. Not now. Cal shook his head. No. You said. I said not now. Bram stood from his table. Actually, Wade, I think now is exactly the time. Wade turned sharply. Bram walked toward us holding a thin folder. I kept copies. Wade stared at him. You were told to destroy those. I know. Bram placed the folder beside mine. These are the transfers you asked me to process. Someone near the stage whispered, Oh my God. Wade's face reddened. You're all making a mistake. I looked at him. No. The mistake was believing you. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, the doors at the back of the room opened. Vera stepped inside. She carried a sealed envelope in one hand. Wade saw her. His entire expression changed. You shouldn't have that. Vera stopped beside me. I don't. She looked at me. She does. She does. Vera placed the sealed envelope in my hands. I looked at Wade. For the first time that night he wasn't angry. He looked afraid. I turned the envelope over. My mother's handwriting was across the front. Wade stepped toward me. Nell, don't. I looked up. Don't what? You don't understand what you're holding. Then explain it. He said nothing. I opened the envelope. Inside was a signed statement from Mom, along with a small recording device and several pages of notes. Vera carefully took the statement and held it up for everyone to see. Your mother prepared this before her death, she said. She documented her concerns about the transfers and specifically identified Wade as the person directing them. Wade shook his head. She was sick. I felt something inside me break. You've used that excuse for years. Vera pressed a button on the recorder. Wade's voice filled the room. It was unmistakable. I heard him discussing the family accounts, moving money through different companies, and making sure nobody would question the transactions. Then came the sentence that made the room completely silent. If Nell ever finds out, nobody will believe her. My fingers tightened around the edge of the table. I looked at the people who had spent years listening to him describe me as irresponsible. Nobody was looking at me anymore. They were looking at Wade. He stepped forward. That recording doesn't prove anything. Bram immediately answered. It proves you told me to change the records. Wade turned toward him. You're lying. Bram opened his folder and pulled out a signed instruction sheet. Then this isn't your signature? Wade stared at it. Cal moved closer. You told me Nell had already agreed to this. Wade looked at him. I was trying to protect you. Cal gave a bitter laugh. By lying to me? Wade didn't answer. Cal turned away. I watched my father look around the room, searching for someone who would defend him. Nobody did. The man who had spent years controlling every conversation suddenly had no one left to control. Vera gathered the documents. These records have already been copied and delivered to the appropriate legal representatives. Wade's face went pale. You planned this. I shook my head. No. Mom did. He looked at the letter in my hands. For once he had nothing to say. I folded the letter carefully and placed it inside my purse. Then I looked at him. You spent years making everyone believe I was the problem. My voice stayed steady. You should have been more careful about leaving evidence. You should have been more careful about leaving evidence. Wade looked at me as if he was waiting for the daughter he'd known how to control to appear. The one who would cry, apologize, or retreat when the room became uncomfortable. He didn't. Vera gathered the documents while Bram remained near the table. Nobody touched the food anymore. The retirement cake sat untouched beneath the decorations with Wade's name written across the top. Cal finally spoke. Uncle Wade, how much did you actually take? Wade's jaw tightened. Don't call me that right now. Cal stared at him. That isn't an answer. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. The investigation that followed uncovered more than any of us expected. Money had been moved through several company accounts. Property had been transferred under misleading agreements. Documents had been prepared to make it appear that I had already received my share of the family assets. The worst part wasn't the amount. It was how carefully Wade had built the story around me. Whenever someone questioned a missing payment, he had an explanation. Nell was irresponsible. Nell couldn't manage money. Nell had already received help. Nell was difficult. People believed him because he had repeated those things for years. Cal eventually admitted that Wade had promised him control of the family property if he stayed quiet. Bram provided his records. Vera provided Mom's statement. I provided everything I had collected. For the first time, nobody had to take my word for it. The truth was sitting in folders, signatures, dates, and bank records. Wade eventually asked to speak with me privately. I agreed, but Vera stayed nearby. He looked exhausted. I made mistakes, he said. I stared at him. You didn't make mistakes. You made decisions. He looked down. I was trying to protect what I'd built. And what about Mom? His eyes lifted. I loved your mother. Then why did you steal from her? He had no answer. After a long silence, he said, I thought you would understand someday. I almost laughed. I understand now. The legal process moved forward and the assets that belonged to Mom were recovered. Relatives who once believed Wade began calling me to apologize. Some cried. Some blamed themselves. I listened, but I didn't rush to make them feel better. They had believed the easiest story. That wasn't my burden anymore. Then Vera called me with the final update. The property Mom had fought to protect was officially restored to my name. I held the paperwork in both hands. Tucked inside the file was Mom's unfinished letter. I read the final words again. Don't spend your life proving your worth to someone who benefits from making you feel worthless. I closed my eyes. For years, I had wanted my father to admit I wasn't a disappointment. Now I realized I didn't need him to say it. I already knew. The retirement celebration was nearly empty when I returned to the banquet hall. Staff were removing the decorations, folding tablecloths, and carrying away the framed photographs that had celebrated Wade's career. His name still hung above the stage, but the room no longer felt like it belonged to him. I sat in the same chair where I had been standing when he called me a disappointment. A few minutes later, Wade approached. Without the crowd around him, he looked different. Older. Smaller. He stopped across from me and asked, Are you satisfied now? I looked at him. No. His eyebrows lifted. Then what do you want? The truth. You have it. No, I said quietly. I have documents. I have evidence. What I wanted for years was a father who didn't make me feel like I was something he had to tolerate. He looked away. I was trying to protect the family. You were protecting yourself. He didn't argue. After a long silence, he asked, Are you really going to take the property? I'm not taking anything from you. I'm taking back what Mom left me. His face tightened. You could have handled this privately. I almost smiled. You spent years making sure nobody would believe me privately. He had nothing to say. I reached into my purse and pulled out the retirement program. My name was printed beneath the words, Family support already provided. I crossed those words out with a pen. Then I folded the program and placed it on the table. Before leaving, I opened Mom's unfinished letter one last time. At the bottom, beneath her final sentence, I wrote, Mom, I wasn't a letdown. I was just the person who finally asked the right questions. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my coat. Then I walked outside. I didn't look back at Wade. For the first time, walking away from my father didn't feel like losing my family. It felt like finally getting my life back.